The Galactic Council chamber was a towering cathedral of light and sound, a testament to the technological superiority of the universe's most advanced civilizations. Representatives from a dozen species sat in their hovering seats, their expressions, alien though they were, betraying a shared condescension. Humanity had been a topic of debate for decades, often dismissed as primitive but harmless. Today, however, the tone was different. "They are fragile," intoned the Rilak delegate, its gelatinous form shimmering under the chamber's glow. "Their history shows brief moments of conflict, but nothing compared to the great wars fought in this galaxy. Their preference for peace is evident. They are unsuited for what lies ahead." A murmur of agreement swept through the chamber. Earth's cultural output, art, music, literature, had painted a picture of a species more inclined toward compassion than conquest. To the Galactic Council, humans were dreamers, not warriors. The exception was the Kreks. A reptilian species that thrived on conquest and subjugation, the Kreks had turned their eyes toward Earth. The Council, bound by a treaty to protect developing species, faced a dilemma. Humanity lacked the military capability to fend off the Kreks alone, but the Council's forces were stretched thin. They needed Earth's cooperation, despite their doubts about its usefulness. "The Kreks do not negotiate," said the Xyrix ambassador, a spindly insectoid creature whose mandibles clicked with irritation. "They consume. If we allow them to conquer Earth, they will gain resources and territory to threaten the rest of us. But involving humans in this war, it is a risk." Risk or not, the decision was made. Representatives from Earth were summoned to the Council, and to their surprise, the humans arrived not with diplomats but with soldiers. The arrival of the U.S. Marines was an event in itself. They entered the chamber in perfect formation, their boots striking the floor in unison. Clad in advanced combat armor and carrying weapons unlike anything the Council had seen, they exuded a confidence that bordered on arrogance. At their head was Colonel James Whitaker, a man whose mere presence seemed to command respect. He scanned the room with sharp, unflinching eyes, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority. "We're not here to debate," Whitaker said, his tone as direct as a gunshot. "We've read your reports. You think we're soft. You think we're unprepared. But I'll tell you this, humans don't fear war. We've been fighting each other for millennia. What you call barbarity we call survival. And if you think we're going to roll over for the Kreks, you're in for a surprise." The Council members exchanged uneasy glances. Whitaker's words were unsettling, but there was no denying their conviction. "Your species has no experience in interstellar warfare," the Rilak delegate countered. "Your methods may suffice on your planet, but against the Kreks they are insufficient." Whitaker's lips curled into a faint smile. "Then it's a good thing we're fast learners." The Council reluctantly accepted the Marines into their alliance, though skepticism lingered in every interaction. To the Council, the Marines were a gamble, a desperate measure taken in the face of an overwhelming threat. As the meeting adjourned, Whitaker addressed his men in a quiet corner of the chamber. "They don't trust us," he said, his voice low but firm. "They think we're amateurs. Fine. Let them think that. When this is over, they'll know exactly what humans are capable of." The Marines nodded, their expressions unyielding. They weren't here to win hearts or change minds. Their mission was simple: to fight, to survive, and to prove that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to adapt, endure, and triumph against all odds. The battlefield was a wasteland of craters and shattered ruins, the air heavy with the acrid scent of burning metal. The Kreks forces descended in overwhelming numbers, their black-armored ranks moving with mechanical precision. The Galactic Council's troops, a mix of various species, faltered almost immediately. Their weapons, designed for deterrence rather than destruction, barely scratched the Kreks' war machines. In stark contrast, the U.S. Marines moved like a well-oiled machine. They split into squads, each unit taking a strategic position while maintaining constant communication. Their weapons roared, the sound deafening as precision rounds tore through Kreks' armor. Where the Council's forces hesitated, the Marines pressed forward, exploiting every weakness with ruthless efficiency. A group of Krek soldiers attempted to flank the Marines, their movements swift and calculated. But the Marines anticipated the maneuver. Sergeant Morales led his squad into an ambush position, using the terrain to their advantage. As the Kreks approached, Morales signaled his team. A coordinated burst of fire erupted, cutting down the enemy before they could react. "Keep moving," Morales barked, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. The squad advanced, leaving no opportunity for the Kreks to regroup. Meanwhile, a Kreks command vehicle emerged from the smoke, its heavy cannons firing indiscriminately. The Council's forces scattered, their formations breaking apart under the relentless assault. Colonel Whitaker assessed the situation from a ridge, his sharp eyes narrowing. "Bring up the javelins," he ordered calmly. 2 Marines sprinted to a nearby position, carrying shoulder-mounted missile launchers. They locked onto the vehicle, the targeting systems humming as they adjusted for distance and wind. With a dull whoosh, the missiles launched, streaking across the battlefield. Both struck the vehicle's weak points, detonating in a fiery explosion that sent debris flying. The Krek's forces paused, their advance disrupted by the loss of their command unit. It was the opening the Marines had been waiting for. "Push forward," Whitaker commanded. The Marines surged ahead, their coordinated assault driving the Kreks back. They didn't just rely on firepower, they used psychological warfare as well. Loudspeakers blared unsettling sounds and taunts in the Kreks' own language, sowing confusion and fear. Flashbangs and smoke grenades created an environment where the enemy couldn't see or hear clearly, forcing them into disarray. Above, a squad of Marines piloted drones outfitted with cameras and explosives. The drones flew low, weaving through the battlefield, and delivered pinpoint strikes to critical targets. Every move was calculated, every action deliberate. Watching from a distance, the Council's representatives were appalled. To them, the Marines' tactics were savage, their willingness to use overwhelming force a stark contrast to the restrained methods of the Council's forces. "They are monsters," muttered one of the delegates, their voice trembling. "They are effective," another countered, though unease tinged their words. As the Kreks began to retreat, the Council's forces regrouped behind the Marines, their morale bolstered by the unexpected victory. The Marines didn't celebrate. They reloaded, patched their wounds, and prepared for the next assault. Whitaker gathered his officers for a quick debrief. "This isn't over," he said, his tone grim. "The Kreks are testing us. Next time they'll hit harder." "We'll be ready," Morales replied, his voice firm. The Council's representatives approached cautiously, their expressions a mix of awe and fear. "Your methods are unsettling," one of them admitted. "But you've achieved what we could not." "The Kreks are retreating?" Whitaker glanced at the delegate, his face unreadable. "Retreating isn't the same as defeated. If you want to win, you need to understand this. The Kreks won't stop until you break them. Half measures won't cut it." The delegate faltered, unsure how to respond. The Marines, however, didn't wait for approval or applause. They had proven their point on the battlefield, and their focus was already on the next challenge. The debriefing room was quiet, the air heavy with tension. Seated across from Colonel Whitaker was Lixus, one of the most vocal members of the Galactic Council. Her sleek, crystalline form glimmered faintly in the dim light, but there was no mistaking the sharpness in her tone. "What we witnessed today cannot be ignored," she said. "Your methods, your reliance on violence, goes against everything we value as a coalition. Surely there must be a better way than this brutality." Whitaker leaned back slightly, his expression calm but unyielding. "Better for who?" "You. The Kreks. Because it sure as hell wouldn't be better for the people we're trying to protect." Lixus bristled. "We strive for peace, Colonel. Diplomacy. Understanding. Your kind seems to know only destruction." Whitaker's eyes hardened. "You think we don't want peace? You think we enjoy this? Let me tell you something about humanity. We've spent most of our history fighting, not because we wanted to but because we had to. Every war, every battle was a lesson in survival. When you're up against an enemy that doesn't value life, you don't get to negotiate. You fight or you die." Lixus faltered, her crystalline body dimming slightly. "But surely there are limits. Surely there must be." "Limits?" Whitaker interrupted, his voice sharp. "We've learned that the only limit in war is the one your enemy imposes. The Kreks don't care about your ideals. They don't care about your values. They care about winning. If you hesitate, if you hold back, they will crush you." Another council member, a tall, furred creature named Drixer, interjected. "And what happens after? Even if you win, what remains of those who survive? Your kind speaks of controlled violence, but how can such a thing exist without consuming you?" Whitaker's gaze softened, if only slightly. "Controlled violence isn't about becoming monsters. It's about doing what's necessary, and only what's necessary. We don't fight because we want to destroy. We fight to protect. To ensure that the people back home, our families, our children, don't have to live under the shadow of extinction. That's what makes us different from the Kreks." Drixer tilted his head, his fur rippling as he considered the words. "And yet, the Kreks would say the same of their cause. How do you justify the cost of becoming like them, even if only in action?" "We're nothing like them," Whitaker said firmly. The Kreks kill because they want power. We fight because we have no other choice. And when it's over, when the enemy is beaten, we stop. We don't take what isn't ours. We don't keep fighting to dominate. That's the difference. Lixis remained silent, her form flickering as though deep in thought. Finally she spoke, her voice quieter now. Your way is difficult to accept. But I cannot deny its effectiveness. Perhaps there is merit in your approach, even if it is difficult for us to embrace. Whitaker gave a small nod. It's not about embracing it. It's about understanding what it takes to survive. And if you want to keep this galaxy safe, you need to understand that sometimes survival means doing things you'd rather not. The council members exchanged uncertain glances, the weight of Whitaker's words settling over them. For centuries they had clung to their ideals of peace and nonviolence. But now, confronted with an enemy as ruthless as the Kreks, those ideals felt increasingly fragile. Outside the room, the Marines were preparing for their next mission. Weapons were being cleaned, armor repaired, and plans reviewed. To them, the philosophy of war wasn't something to debate. It was something to live. They understood the cost and they were willing to pay it, because they knew what was at stake. Whitaker stood, signaling the end of the conversation. You don't have to like what we do, he said, looking at Lixis and Drixer. But if you want to win this war, you're going to need us. And you're going to need to let us do it our way. As he left the room, Lixis turned to Drixer. Perhaps we were wrong about them, she said softly. Perhaps they are not as fragile as we thought. Drixer nodded, his fur bristling. Not fragile, but dangerous. Let us hope they remain our allies. The Kreks launched their counterattack without warning. Their fleet, larger and more heavily armed than anyone had anticipated, emerged from hyperspace above one of the Galactic Council's core planets. The Council's defenses, already stretched thin, were overwhelmed in minutes. Ships disintegrated under the Kreks' relentless assault, their advanced weapons tearing through shields like paper. Panic rippled through the Council chambers as reports flooded in. The Kreks were not just attacking, they were annihilating. Civilians were being slaughtered, infrastructure obliterated. It was clear this was no mere invasion, it was a message. Amid the chaos, Colonel Whitaker and his Marines stood calm, listening to the frantic transmissions. Whitaker reviewed the battlefield data with a practiced eye, his mind already racing through possible strategies. He turned to his officers. They're betting on us panicking, he said. We won't give them the satisfaction. Get the troops ready. We're taking the fight to them. The Marines deployed with precision, their actions coordinated like pieces on a chessboard. Whitaker split his forces into 3 units. One to fortify key defensive positions, another to evacuate civilians, and the third, his hammer, to strike directly at the heart of the Kreks fleet. The first unit held the line, using their advanced weaponry and tactics to buy precious time. They fought not with reckless abandon but with calculated efficiency, every shot counting, every position reinforced. Kreks forces, accustomed to enemies folding under their might, found themselves bogged down in brutal firefights. Meanwhile, the second unit worked tirelessly to shepherd civilians to safety. Under enemy fire, they escorted thousands to evacuation ships, using their own bodies as shields when necessary. The Council's forces, inspired by the Marines' bravery, joined the effort, working side by side to save their people. But it was the third unit that delivered the decisive blow. Whitaker led them personally, piloting a commandeered Council dropship into the thick of the Kreks fleet. The Marines had studied the Kreks' tactics and technology, identifying a critical weakness in their command structure. Unlike humans, the Kreks relied heavily on centralized leadership, and if that leadership was disrupted, their forces would descend into chaos. The Marines infiltrated the Kreks flagship, moving through its corridors with practiced precision. Every corner was a potential ambush, but they pressed forward, their objective clear. Whitaker's team reached the bridge where the Kreks commander awaited them, a towering figure encased in black armor. The ensuing battle was brutal and unrelenting. The Kreks commander fought with a ferocity that matched the Marines' own, but it wasn't enough. Whitaker and his team brought the commander down, crippling the Kreks' chain of command. With their leadership gone, the Kreks fleet began to falter. Back on the surface, the tide turned. The Marines and the Council's forces pressed their advantage, driving the Kreks into a full retreat. Ships that had once rained fire on the planet's cities now fled, pursued by relentless human pilots. The victory was absolute. For the first time in their history, the Kreks had been not just defeated, but humiliated. In the aftermath, the Council gathered to address the outcome. The mood in the chamber was somber, the weight of what they had witnessed heavy on everyone present. Lixis spoke first, her crystalline form glowing faintly. Humanity has shown us a side of war we have long avoided, she said. It is brutal, it is terrifying, but it is undeniably effective. Without the Marines, we would have been destroyed. Another delegate, Drixer, stepped forward. The Kreks have learned to fear us because of them. Perhaps it is time we re-evaluate our approach to conflict. Whitaker stood before the council, his expression unreadable. We didn't do this to prove a point, he said. We did it because it needed to be done. If you want to keep this galaxy safe, you'll need to learn from this. Not everything can be solved with diplomacy. Sometimes you have to fight. The council offered humanity a seat among their leadership, acknowledging the critical role the Marines had played. But Whitaker declined on behalf of Earth. We're not here to lead, he said. We're here to protect. Keep your seat. Just make sure you're ready next time. As the council debated their next steps, the Marines quietly returned to their ships. There was no celebration, no speeches, only a grim determination to be ready for whatever came next. Humanity had shown the galaxy what it was capable of, and though their methods were feared, they were also respected. The Marines had proven that sometimes, survival required more than ideals. It required action, and humanity was more than willing to provide it.